start with an easy one first, just to get the juices going. And I'd like to ask first the VCs, anyone can pick this up, what do you think the toughest job the entrepreneurs have in their daily life? The toughest thing they do part of their job.
So I think, maybe I'll start with this. I think, you know, it's definitely a grind. Every day is a grind. I think there's an interesting quote, someone says that the life of an entrepreneur, every day is disastrous and horrible, but every year is amazing. Because when they look back at the year, they see how much they've accomplished. But if I had to say, I would say probably fundraising, recruiting high quality people, and executing on the business. But specifically hiring and fundraising are probably two of the biggest challenges that they face.
Any quick comments from Walid and Khalid?
I think, for me, I think what I'd imagine is the biggest waste of time for entrepreneurs and the biggest challenge is actually dealing with us. It's very hard for entrepreneurs to figure out, I think, what the VCs want, how much they want to raise, like how interested are they. And I think the process of fundraising is probably one of the most value-destroying processes a startup can undertake. And the onus is on us to kind of figure out how to make that a much smoother and easier process.
Walid?
I think everything is tough. I mean, life is tough, so the life of an entrepreneur is tougher. Building an organization, building revenue, building, you know, a bigger company. Everything is tough, and fundraising in particular has its own mechanics, and sometimes markets play against you, sometimes investors are at a different mindset than you are, and so yeah, all of it.
So the VCs think the toughest thing you guys deal with is dealing with them. Do you have other tough things? I mean, what do you think their toughest job is?
What do I think their toughest job is?
Yeah, what do you think the tough part of being a VC is?
Probably just listening to the endless array of pitches and trying to really understand who's going to be a winner and who's not. I think it's just it's a lot to listen to pitches day in and day out, and how do you really decipher who's going to be the next hit? I think that's probably difficult, and to listen to these dreams of people coming to you and probably putting their heart and soul on the line, saying I believe in this, and then probably rejecting them is probably very hard for VCs to do, because people are coming with their dreams and you're telling them that it's not good enough. So I think that's probably hard for you guys as well.
Other comments?
I would say that the VCs today in MENA have a big responsibility, because they're sort of the first people that are trying to build the ecosystem. So I think there's a big responsibility on their shoulders to do the right bets and make sure that they're able to support the companies that they invest in. So for these companies to grow and become unicorns or you know, really successful role models for other companies. So I think they have a really big job in terms of doing, you know, selecting the right people, growing them, supporting them, funding them well so that they can be successful.
So I agree with what Joy and Lulu said, but one thing that I've realized a bit recently is the VCs are also fundraising. So I don't think that's an easy part of being a VC as well. So there's definitely some empathy with entrepreneurs doing fundraising, and that hence the VCs are saying it's tough. So that's probably the toughest part of their job, fundraising for themselves.
Absolutely. All right, so I will start with the statements. And again, I neither endorse nor agree or disagree with those statements. Those were compiled by people I talked with. So, statement for the VCs. VCs in the region have big egos, and they don't know what to take to build a business. They've never been entrepreneurs.
Okay, I can speak for myself. I've tried starting a couple of businesses and failed at. I didn't last very long, so that's when I switched over to the other side. So I think there is some truth to the idea that, you know, like on the whole, a lot of VCs have not built businesses. But I think good VCs are former entrepreneurs. I think the best VCs are probably former entrepreneurs. I think within our team we have former entrepreneurs. Our chairman Fadi is, built Aramex, and I think that's an important part of the mix. And I think it's the same for both MEVP and Beko. I mean, they've all come with like a lot of depth around former entrepreneurs who have now shifted to the other side. For myself, I've never been successful as an entrepreneur, so.
Ego?
I want to comment on that just a second. I think Okay, the first question before ego comes into play, I think, it's very rare to find, at least in an early stage ecosystem, given how early it is, there are not many veteran tech entrepreneurs. In Beko, obviously we have Danny, who's built Beko.com, Bait.com, and then, some of us have also I've started several service-based businesses that are successful, but it's rare to find technology entrepreneurs. There are a handful, even Maktoub, Samih, of course, is also in this space. So I think they have empathy towards the entrepreneurial journey. Now with ego, I think it's a bit of both ways. So the entrepreneurs also have ego when they come into discussions, especially, so I think there is a clash occasionally. Personally, I would like to say that I don't have any ego, but you never know in discussions. I'm sure there are entrepreneurs I've dealt with that think I'm not a very nice person, right? And I think that happens to all of us. I hope not, but that's the case. But with ego, I think it's if they're able to execute and demonstrate that they can execute, I think, we give respect to that kind of entrepreneur versus coming in and kind of with their chest out trying to say, I have 20 different term sheets from 20 different investors, some of whom aren't even VCs, and kind of building up this valuation and term sheet that is a bit far-fetched. It sometimes happens, and I think those are the situations we don't particularly like dealing with.
Cool. Walid?
So, do entrepreneurs have egos as well? It's a question to the entrepreneurs. Look, when you speak about egos, those are subjective things. Sometimes there's chemistry between investors and entrepreneurs, and sometimes there's not, and that's normal human behavior. But to Lulu's question, yes, we have a responsibility towards the ecosystem, and we are entrepreneurs ourselves. We started building the venture capital firms 6 years ago when no one heard of venture capital. So we are entrepreneurs, and we empathize with the entrepreneurial journey, and at the end of the day, we get paid on success. So egos or not egos, what matters to us as managers of fund, and that's something that not all entrepreneurs maybe realize, is we get paid only if we return the capital to our investors and make profits. And that's what we're incentivized by, not ego.
So, sorry, 3 minutes are up. Guys, comments on that?
Yeah, I don't think entrepreneurs have egos, actually. We're actually...
Your statement is coming next. Now you can comment on what they said.
Yeah, because Amir said, that some people think VCs as egos, but he said that I think entrepreneurs have egos.
As well.
I think entrepreneurs are in a very difficult position, right? Like especially the early stage entrepreneurs, when you don't have track record, like the guys raising a Series B maybe, and have things to prove. If you're an early stage entrepreneur, you're coming into these angels or super angels, and then you don't know how to do it. Maybe you're not mentored. The ecosystem is still very nascent, so you have to put on a front or a face of confidence to say that, okay, I know what I'm doing, to be able to kind of sell yourself, especially initially. So I wouldn't say it's ego actually, but it's part of the job to be able to sell yourself and your business. You need that confidence.
Joy?
So I'm a little confused because the questions went from do we feel that VCs have egos to whether entrepreneurs have egos. So I haven't seen that. I mean, the VCs that we've pitched in the region have been really quite friendly and open and receptive. So I haven't seen that ego from
good.
it.
So that statement. So let me go then question to you guys, a statement to you, and it's the same statement actually. It's funny because the number one thing when I asked a bunch of people, they said ego, and VC said entrepreneurs have big egos and are more than egos also are stubborn.
I don't think it's, and going back to what she was saying, and sorry, I don't think it's, I agree with her, it's about confidence. It's about believing in what you're selling and coming across with that belief. It's really believing in yourself when the world knocks you. And that may come across as being a little egotistical, but there's a difference between being eccentric and being confident. And I think that's what she was saying. Do you agree?
So I think from my perspective, you actually want the entrepreneur to be a bit stubborn.
Exactly.
Otherwise, how do you succeed, right? You're up against so many odds. And if you're not going to be stubborn and persevere, you're not going to be successful. So I think the stubbornness is actually good. And VCs probably want the entrepreneurs to be somewhat stubborn, at least within reason, at least.
I mean, to react to what Mudassir is saying, I think a minimal level of ego and self-assurance and confidence and stubbornness is critical to a successful business. And we don't want to invest in businesses that we think we know the business better than the entrepreneurs. If we're in that position, then there's something wrong to begin with, right?
Cool.
Just to maybe
sorry, go
say
ahead.
one thing about the VCs and the egos in the region. I think the VCs have had it a bit easy up until now, right? You know, it's been entrepreneurs chasing the VCs versus the other way around. So I would love for this thing to change in the near term, and I think let them run for their money a bit.
No, I think it's happening now.
It's
I think
starting to
beginning
happen.
now. But traditionally, you're absolutely right. I think the market dynamics were such that they were with capital rather than against capital. So if you're raising money, it was harder versus if you were deploying capital. But equally, and to go back to an earlier point, it was very hard for all of us to raise money. I mean, you know, we actually, all three of us started in the same place. We started in the same firm. And we've all kind of branched out into different places. And we've all had a very similar experience in terms of how we, you know, raising capital and how difficult that is. Because you need to convince other people to give you money because you think you can give it to other people who can use that money better than you. So it's a difficult process.
Joy is itching.
No, I was just going to say that as more and more talent comes out of this region, and you hear more and more stories, I think it's going to open up to what we call, I'm from Silicon Valley, California, what we call FOMO, which is fear of missing out. When more success stories like Souk.com come out and everybody hears about them, all the investors who could have invested in Souk but didn't are going to have that fear of missing out. And then it's going to be the investors who are running after the entrepreneurs. And that will slowly happen here in time as more and more success stories come out.
So on FOMO, I heard another kind of FOMO yesterday, which is that VCs have a FOMO on missing out on deals. So rather than them saying no to an entrepreneur on the first two meetings, they drag him along and along and along, and sometimes have radio silence where the entrepreneurs don't know what's happening. So rather it's the upside of, there's no upside of saying no, there's only a downside of saying no, so you don't say no. So you just sit around and wait for others to take a move. Comment on that.
No, I mean, okay, this is not about egos or emotions.
No, sorry, different question.
I know, it's a different question, but it goes back to that. We are institutions, right? We have teams, we build teams over time, and no, life is not easy, Mudassir. Life is very hard, being venture capitalist, building an asset class, taking money from institutions and investing in an institutional way, right? So we spend time on those companies, and sometimes, yes, maybe the investment is not doesn't have the right metrics or the right data, or doesn't fit our investment criteria, or somebody in the team has a benchmark or an opinion that proves that we can maybe wait a little bit and then revisit in the future. So you know, and that behavior is not a MENA VC behavior. Anyone who raised money outside of MENA sees how venture capitalists in the US, for instance, are ruthless. So so I agree. You should give feedback. You should give constructive feedback. Probably not drag your feet. We don't do this. We don't like this type of behavior. We try to be as upfront and honest as possible, and we say we're in or we're out. But that doesn't mean you cannot build a relationship and for instance, we track companies sometimes up to 6 months before we invest, before we're comfortable investing in a company, because we build the chemistry with the founder, because we understand the metrics more, because we're able to bring something to the table. As early stage investors, we like to be activists, and this is why when the company becomes too big, for instance, at the scale of Karim, we feel we have no contribution to put on the table at the Series C, D level, and then we pass. So we probably should maybe do probably a better job at explaining our investment thesis and style.
So basically, you're saying, Walid, that in your case, it's more of the process is long because you need to build a relationship, you need to be comfortable with that. Khalid and Amir?
I think back to this kind of FOMO point, for good or for worse, and I think this is to some degree kind of universal. The process of investing, one of the key kind of investment considerations is who else is investing. So sometimes that can kind of drag a process out. It's a tautology of sorts, but one that's necessary, because we take a lot of comfort from investing with MEVP, from investing with Beko, with investing with other investors, because that means there's going to be someone at the next check to support the company, and the next check. And each of us can bring our own kind of unique added value to the company. So, you know, some opportunities are de-risked by having a syndicate of investors, and sometimes we're waiting for who's going to make the first commitment. I think the best thing we can do and what we can do better is really be more upfront about that and say, look, we like you, we have some questions over the business, but you know, we'd commit if someone else commits. And I think we can do a better job of making that very transparent to entrepreneurs.
So I think, you know, we've learned a lot from our time investing over the past 4 years, and we've kind of made our process much more efficient. So today, you know, what we found with the entrepreneurs, and they can comment, is it takes probably 6 months to 9 months to close a deal with a VC here. You know, and I think that's a big problem, and we realize that. So when we engage with entrepreneurs, you know, we're very transparent from the outset if we're genuinely interested with those companies, and if we are, we've refined our process so that the time to close a deal goes from, let's say, 6 months to 2 months, and we do that just because we don't want to, you know, we know the entrepreneur's stressed and wants to continue running their business, so having a 6 to 9 month time to close is problematic for them, right? And the other thing of fear of missing out, I think we generally like to lead most of our investments, okay? And we love co-investing as well, but we find ourselves sometimes, and this is not a pun on any of the VCs here, but I think we find ourselves sometimes not necessarily aligning ourselves with the terms that are being already set by other VCs, and therefore have to decline the opportunity even though we're interested in the company. That's happened a couple of times.
We'll get to that particular point in a bit. But comments on the long cycles of investing?
I mean, from the first company that I've raised in Silicon Valley, for my first company, it took me 6 to 9 months to close. So I think 9 is on the high end, but I think on the average, I think it's about 6 months. So it's pretty standard. But you know, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it. But the number one job of the CEO is to continually raise money, right? So we're always fundraising, right? There's not a 6 month or 9 months. We're continually fundraising through the whole cycle of our business.
Go.
So from my perspective, of course, you guys have to do the due diligence and see the track record of the company. But there is a point where the VCs decide we want to invest. And what's a bit unfortunate is the time it takes from that point to the closing of the deal and getting money in the bank. That's really painful. Oh, yeah. Now, you guys have decided you want to put money in. We have decided that we want you as investors. And there are like these shareholders agreements and subscription agreements that need to be written and agreed on. And that is completely non-value add for both the parties. Now, everyone is trying to negotiate the best terms for them. But I think that the place where there is room for improvement is let's just agree on what the fair terms are for both the entrepreneur and the VCs in the region and just speed up that process. We have spent in the 2 rounds or 3 rounds that we have done, I think the first round was about 6 to 7 months after the term sheet, 6 to 7 months of just documents back and forth. Second round was probably even longer, I think 7, 8 months, and the last round was a bit faster. But that is a complete waste of time, and it's so frustrating because we are not lawyers, right? We don't even know what half these things mean. And then we have to hire expensive lawyers, and they tell us all sorts of things, and it's in their interest to prolong the thing because they're billing you by the hour. So you're in a pretty difficult situation. It doesn't add value to the...
And probably should have been the other way around for you. Ideally, it would have been fast early on and slow later on, because at the early stages where you're almost going to go bankrupt. Lulu, comments on that?
Fully agree. I mean, it took me, I think, 6 to 8 months to raise the second round, which was really painful. And obviously, yes, after term sheet as well, there's a couple of months of negotiations and lawyers and shareholders agreements and all of that, which is a complete waste of time actually as well. I think if you're an early stage startup, and if an investor is going to invest, I don't know, $200,000-300,000, let it be quick and don't drag it with the entrepreneur for 6 months. Redoing the deck 15 times because someone's asking them to change something in the Excel or whatever, which is super painful and not good for the business. And as I mean, most of the VCs and the entrepreneurs and the angels, they know each other because we always meet at events and we kind of are familiar with each other's businesses. So why not this should technically make the process a lot faster because the VCs know the entrepreneur, they understand the business a little bit. So maybe just come over to our offices, spend a couple of days and see if you like it and make a decision.
I think it's great comments. Just let me add one thing that also Mudassir touched upon. Don't forget that VCs also have investment committees and bosses and LPs and investors.
Yeah.
So I think as I hear both sides, it feels to me that transparency is something that's key. The length, even in Silicon Valley, took you 6 to 9 months, so it's not something you can really shortcut it, maybe on earlier, but everyone has a boss, everyone else has someone to report to, and there's things that you have to be ready for.
But
now,
maybe
comments, statements on the startups. Do you want to comment?
just to Mudassir's comment, maybe standardizing the documents maybe, or like the general fair terms might be quicker so that everyone's familiar with what to expect. And then
I think what we're saying is that it's not the process of deciding. It's after they've decided that's painful. You know, and I always say this, and I've said this over and over, that it ain't over till the money's in the bank. Mudassir's laughing because you'll have the term sheet in front of you, but it doesn't mean anything until the money is in the bank.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think like deals fall apart at closing all the time, and I think, and they needn't do in venture, right? It can happen in PE, but it shouldn't happen in venture. And I think part of the learnings we're doing as we are a maturing ecosystem is that there is a move towards standardizing a lot of the terms. The terms effectively are set by the market, right? And there is kind of a coalescence around kind of a specific kind of set of terms that seem to be acceptable across the board. There are some variations, and I think we can move a lot faster. In terms of a seed round, there's no reason a seed round, like up to $500,000, shouldn't be done in 2 months, a month, you know, even a month to 2 months to close a seed round. That needs to be kind of our new normal. And I think we're all heading in that direction. I think that's where it's going.
We can wire $100,000 overnight, for instance. We have the discretionary power to do that if we like the team. But the more you go up, the more the ticket gets bigger. Obviously, you need agreements and lawyers. And I also agree. I wish we could cut it short. And I don't think we can standardize terms. Every company, every deal has its own logic and terms that you need to sit and negotiate and talk about.
No, but even just to add, the term sheets that we draft are pretty elaborate. They're pretty, you know, they're not just high-level terms. They're in-depth enough that they can be easily translated into the shareholders' agreement. And I think obviously it depends on the stage. I think Mudassir's case, obviously, as later stage it goes, it's harder to close in that short time frame. But when he was maybe in certain cases, when you're raising a seed round, it should be very easily to transact.
By the way, if you guys have questions, tweet me at Habib H. I have my phone here, so if you have questions you want for me to throw out. On the entrepreneur side, one of the comments I heard from many VCs was that entrepreneurs don't give enough attention to governance. Once they take the money from investors, they stop doing the reporting or become a black box, and the transparency becomes too tough for them to be able to know what's happening with their money.
Guys,
Okay,
guys,
I'm just a messenger here.
I can speak on behalf of my entrepreneurs, okay? I work 18-hour days. I'm lucky if I get 2 hours of sleep a night. Okay, I have to continually raise money and build a company and hire talent. You know, to babysit the VCs, and I call it babysit, it's like, guys, feasibly, I just don't have the time. And I mean that with all sincerity.
Don't take our money.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah,
Don't take our money if you don't want to babysit us.
So I think that people, this is
What did Amir
interesting
say?
because
I
I
didn't
think
hear.
what did he say? I have.
what do
So I
you-
just want to.
What do you say? They didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm just saying, don't take our money then if we bother you with questions and governance and
Don't take his
ask
money.
questions.
No.
I'll be glad to take your money and, you know, give you the reports like I do, but I mean to
Wait.
call and to hold your hand. Guys, it's not that we don't want to,
I don't
it's just
think-
we
I
don't
don't
have
think-
time.
I don't think- just to
Seriously,
add,
that's a
one-
serious
one
consideration.
second.
Don't take our money.
I want to add a point
Amir.
here because I think that that this is maybe a problem that we have is that entrepreneurs sometimes think that they're doing us a favor by reporting, when actually half the time when we meet with entrepreneurs, you know, we help them build a dashboard that's important for them. These are metrics they should be paying attention to. It's not for us. It's like if they look at these metrics, they'll know a lot more about their business and therefore have a better idea of how to grow it, right? It's not just please give us these numbers, and then we'll come back to you later on. The reporting is much more of a value-added activity if you take it seriously than if you just think of it as a chore.
No, and I hear you and I respect that, but what I would love is instead of asking us questions, like I would love when I call up the VCs, say, how can you help us grow the business? I'd love it if you take those phone calls.
That's why you should have a board, and that's why governance is important, and that's why you should meet and report to the board. And this is, to Amir's point, we screen 300-400 companies a year. We know what's going on. We have benchmarks. We can help. We can activate markets. We can do many things. But how can we know what we do if we don't sit and talk? And at the end of the day, it's a partnership. We are your partners in the company. We're equal partners. And that mindset is very important to, it goes both ways. We have a responsibility towards you by investing that money, and you have a responsibility towards your partners.
Definitely, but I think as entrepreneurs up here, we can speak and say there are definitely VCs who got out of their way to help, and there are VCs that you can ask and do nothing. Will you agree on this, guys?
Yes, I think...
we'll get to that, we'll get to that statement, but I'd like to stay on this topic for a second. Khaled, you didn't comment.
I think vis-a-vis reporting, I think the reporting, I do agree to some degree there's a thin line when the VC interaction with the underlying company can get too much. And I think that's the point where, going back to the idea of the VC thinking he can run the business better than the entrepreneur. If you're in that place, no amount of reporting is going to fix anything. The business is bust. What the reporting should be is just a natural alignment of these are the objectives we together set out pre-investment. This is what we're getting to. The VCs all agree, the companies and the VCs agree what that reporting is pre-transaction. It's in the agreements. This is what we want on a quarterly basis. And so as long as that's adhered to with a robust governance structure through the board, I think it's a positive thing for the company rather than a negative thing, particularly when it's channeled towards supporting the company.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's
So just just to bridge the two, right? I think most of the investors in the region, I've actually found that they have empathy towards the entrepreneur. They understand that it's tough being an entrepreneur in this region. Entrepreneurs are working 18, 20-hour days, and generally quite flexible. So I think that empathy is there in most of the VCs. Some that don't have it should develop it. But at the same time, I feel that us as entrepreneurs, we don't take advantage of the VCs enough. I think sometimes we can treat them like VCs versus an extension of our team. And we can do a lot more to actually give them action items. Amir, can you please go and sign up Emirates for Kareem? Like, please do this. Deadline is tomorrow. Let's start treating investors as an extension of our team. If they want to be partners, let's make them partners.
I mean, absolutely. I think the most successful companies we've seen are companies that come to us and say, look, I need A, B, C, D, E, F from you, and how can you deliver it to me and when? Before we even invest. And they drive us to deliver to them, and they see where we can support better than we can ourselves. And we've seen, I think, Mudassir, you're a great example of that. So Mudassir, when we first invested, gave us a laundry list of 12 things and a deadline. Said, I want this A, B, C, D, E, F, G done. I want done quickly.
McKinsey guy.
And I think that's a great thing. And I always tell the companies that come to pitch, say, you tell us what you want from us, and we'll bake it into the deal. We'll put it in there.
Just to add, I think the psyche of the entrepreneur sometimes is a bit difficult if they treat us as investors, because I look at it as a long-term partnership, as Mudassir explains, but sometimes when we engage with entrepreneurs and trying to understand, okay, what are your challenges? They're afraid to show us that they're having issues with their business, and so they just try to build this positive sort of image of how they're performing and not telling us about what the challenges are because they're afraid it'll affect follow-on funding or other issues, and that sort of split can have problems.
So
that's 100% true.
So transparency. So guys, we're going to be transparent more. Sorry, Mudassir.
So one last thing where I think there is some room for improvement is an introduction to someone is not enough.
Yes.
You need to do something.
Yeah, because a lot of times VCs will make the introductions, and then you basically have to chase and get the thing done. So I think we need to hold them a bit more accountable.
Guys, on that note, and again, I don't agree or not disagree with this. I'm the messenger here, and I'm conflicted to say that anyway. So I got comments saying VCs in the region don't add value. They overpromise on that and underdeliver.
Okay.
Again, I wear a VC
No,
hat,
but-
so I can't,
You
I'm
guys,
conflicted to
what
say this,
Kareem-
but I'm just relaying the message.
But what Kareem's comment is 100% correct. Sometimes they think they're helping by saying, hey, meet this guy. You have to do the extra effort. It takes more than just an introduction with an email. So when you said that, I completely, that went off, because I've experienced that itself. You need the extra
But
push.
you don't have VCs from the region, do you?
Yes, we do.
Who's your investor?
Oh,
Well,
Not throwing names out
none
there.
on the
right?
panel.
Not us.
None of us, yeah.
None of the
Not
panelists.
us.
Okay, so
I can comment on that construction because I think we should go through an example to understand it a bit better. Obviously, this is not about an email introduction, hey, meet this guy or have coffee with this guy. Is much deeper than this. The way we get involved in companies, and that's why we are involved at the early stage level, is because we want to sit with the team, the entrepreneurs. We sometimes have board meetings with the entire team of the company, not only the entrepreneurs, and understand the problems and give value. First 100 days, and I noticed it's our biggest value is strategy. Stuff like what is the right KPI you should care about? Is it what type of metrics? How do you measure it? Why is it important? Why should we drop other stuff? And we can give a lot of examples on
The
that
benchmarks you
contribution. Not only the benchmarks, but of course the benchmarks and the strategy, right? A lot of the entrepreneurs. So there's a stat that's actually very insightful. In the US, the average number of founding teams is between 5 and 6 people who start a company, a startup. In the Middle East, most entrepreneurs who come to us are either one-man show or one-woman shows or 2-people teams. So you're starting with less brains around the table. And once you engage at that early level, you need to set the strategy and the KPIs. And that discussion is an intense discussion. It's not an easy one to crack.
so what I'm hearing
And
from
then
you,
it builds up. It builds up with time. There is obviously capital, and in case of some companies who scale and they need $1 million, then $5 million, then $10 million, then $30 million. That exercise is time consuming.
let me summarize what Walid said, and we'll go to you.
And I can give
so
a laundry list of stuff.
what I'm hearing
but,
from you is that you actually would be able to give much more value if the entrepreneurs who actually would open up their tables and sit with you together and early on.
We
so
can't
Amir,
run out.
comment
I think
on that.
what the approach we're taking is that, the VC model, we're not saying, okay, let's just do what the US is doing. So the approach we're taking is we've engaged with our entrepreneurs and we've asked them questions and we've said, listen, let's really understand what are the challenges you're facing and let's actually build in our organization in-house expertise to help open doors and really add value in these companies. And we figured that there are 3 areas that entrepreneurs have challenges with: sales and distribution, or access to markets, marketing communications, and I would say talent acquisition. Those are the 3 where we are building expertise in-house to really support, because saying we're going to go out and hire people for them is pretty far-fetched. We're a small team, so we can't really go and interview people and go and hire, right? But if we have someone dedicated in our company whose job is solely to build pipeline for all our portfolio companies, is important.
And you have a great case study with Property Finder as well, where you
exactly.
were about that. Sorry, Khaled, you want to comment?
I think at least what we do, the way we kind of think about it is, when we're looking at a company, we very carefully sit together with the founders and figure out what we can support with. And that kind of hedges on a number of axes. Some of it's access to markets, access to talent, access to sometimes technology, and sometimes access to different types of distribution. And then a big part of it's also strategy review. So a lot of what we do is really compile the post-transaction plan with the entrepreneur as we're looking through the deal. And so that we have a very specific itemized list of stuff that we're going to kind of hit the ground running as soon as the money's in the bank. And it's important, like what he's saying, the first 100 days are critical. That's when you really kind of ramp up a business. That's when you set the tone for the next 3-4 years. And I think a lot of the value we can deliver is within those 100 days.
We also have portfolio companies. There's more than 1,000 people who work across the MEVP portfolio company, and believe me, they have solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So
Maybe let's hear from Mudassir and Mudulu, because only Joy commented on this. Maybe they're in agreement, actually. I don't know.
The fact that the VCs add value through...
I mean, whatever you heard from, whatever you want to comment on.
I think this is one difference that we have seen between regional and international VCs. They are more eager to help, and they also recognize that in this region to be successful, you need access to resources, and you need some doors open that might be difficult for us to open on our own. So I think they recognize that, and that part is quite valuable. I completely agree with that. At least in our case, I haven't found a lot of strategic help from VCs. I think they don't understand the business at the depth that is required. And I found that international VCs, as comparison, they have a better grasp on these business models, and they can actually be a lot more insightful when it comes to strategy versus. So I think if I were to just compare international thing, business development, super strong, super eager to help, very helpful.
Even hires. I mean, Yusuf Tukan came to you through a EIR position.
Founder, yes. And on the strategy, I'm less sure. We haven't seen much of it in our business, at least.
Lulu?
I think it's, you also need to pick your VCs in the same way the VCs pick the entrepreneurs. I think chemistry is very important. Like, do you treat the VC as a mentor, or do you see them as someone that you have to, report to? And I think the relationship is very important. I was blessed recently with some really amazing investors that I feel are really there for me to support me through thick and thin. And that really helps me as an entrepreneur to have like a really good relationship with the investors. I think reporting is good, by the way, to go back on the reporting note, because it helps us look at the dashboard and the metrics and make sure that we're on the right track. What I don't like in reporting is if we have to do like elaborate presentations with like a lot of stuff, because I think that is time wasting.
Entrepreneurs, I was told by the comments I mentioned also, have one of the things that scares investors, that entrepreneurs have a lack of focus. And they're all over the place, and every day they come with different ideas and different things, and then eventually things fizzle down. I'm not talking about you specifically, but the entrepreneurs, maybe you or around you, comments on that.
Well, I think that VCs at the end of the day invest in the talent of the team. And if you trust in the talent of the team, then you know that they're going to figure it out, right? I mean, a classic example is the Groupon guys back in Silicon Valley. When they came to pitch, their original model was not what it came out to be. I think it takes time to figure out what works. I think there's trial and errors. I think there's failures. I think there's successes. I think you have to try till you understand what it is that sticks. So it's not a lack of focus. It's a lack of trying to figure out what's going to work, and sometimes you pivot, and sometimes you do pivot. Groupon pivoted. That's a great example right there. They completely pivoted, and I think it's not focus. I think it's just determination.
So, good answer, but that's not exactly the comment that was conveyed to me. It's not the amount of pivoting or change. I think many of the VCs here would welcome that. It's more the non-grasp of your numbers, of unit economics, the lack of knowledge of where you're going without a particular, just going and changing and pivoting just because you read it on TechCrunch is not enough. You have to have much stronger grasp over the business, and that's where sometimes VC get a bit concerned.
Yeah, I mean, reporting aside, I mean, nothing scares us more than being in a company with a founder who doesn't know their numbers. That is the scariest thing that you can come across, and it happens because a lot of entrepreneurs get swept away with like the kind of high-level kind of strategic stuff they're doing, or like big initiatives, or a fundraise, and it's easy to kind of lose sight of the kind of the nuts and bolts that drive the business, and that's a very scary thing when that happens. And part of the reporting thing is to kind of really be able to kind of anchor that thinking within the company.
Numbers. What do you mean by numbers?
So it depends by business, by the type of business, by the vertical, by the industry, etc. But everything from you want to distill the business down to kind of granular unit economics. So what are the drivers of business? How much does it cost to acquire a customer? How much revenue does my customer bring to me? What kind of incremental cost do I need to support that sort of growth? So all that to kind of run the full gambit of what the drivers of a business, and it's quite specific to each industry and each company.
I want to add something to Mudassir's point about local and international VCs and the knowledge. First of all, there's not a lot of active VCs in MENA. So there may be a lot of VCs, but the active ones who's actually making deals and doing stuff is not that big. Second, because we come in a region that has a certain type of, certain companies of Me Too's, and specifically when you're talking about the on-demand economy or marketplaces that require a hyper-local activation because demand is hyper-local and supply is hyper-local, we actually have an advantage because we have to adapt to our markets. So yes, it's good to understand the theory and get a sense of from international VCs what works or what not works, but at least in our portfolio, we make a great job, the companies we invest in make a great job competing against international players because of the local touch and the innovation, whether it's on pricing or business models or product market fit. And I would not underestimate the amount of knowledge that we have amassed to address the issues that international VCs will not necessarily address. Yes, they may be a bit more knowledgeable than us with regards to what works in the on-demand economy because, I mean, okay.
I think it's just a function of exposure a bit as well, right? Some of the international VCs that we speak to, they've seen decks of our competitors globally, right? So they're able to tell us this is the benchmark, this is the benchmark, this is the benchmark.
I can give you an example.
There are VCs that are specialized in specific subsectors. We unfortunately can't just say, okay, we're going to be marketplace-based investors. So those, I totally agree with them. Those are the VCs, the ones who specialize in that specific sector, is going to have far more insight than us. That's totally
One of the value add of VCs like you is to bring other co-investors who have that
start bringing in.
Yes, but it's more than that. I mean, I can give you an example. We have a company that is a content company that lives on subscriptions, and last quarter it added 250,000 paid subscribers in a couple of months' time. And everybody is amazed at the speed of the execution they've built. And it turns out that actually, because we understand how to take a dollar out of the consumer business and put it in ours because they think differently and set up differently, we're expecting another 250 this month. So we also know and have cracked, and we have other portfolio companies now coming and saying, how did you do it? I want to do this. I need subscriptions on my app. What the hell is going on?
So on that, Amir, comments on the numbers.
So the numbers, I mean, in terms of focus on the numbers, look, I think it's definitely the biggest issue is not knowing the numbers and the metrics. But I think what that fundamentally tells me that there's going to be misalignment for us as investors. And from a strategic perspective, I think for me, focus also on strategy is like, you're going to spend the next 6 months attacking this particular problem. Sometimes what happens is they get a lot of insights and kind of pivot into something else before they have even tested their initial strategy. So they're two hand in hand. So numbers is definitely one thing, and strategy another.
Yeah, I think our strength is, kind of as VCs, is trying to bridge that knowledge gap we do a lot of networking internationally as much as we can, particularly for this reason, so that we can be able to say, Mudassir, please talk to, this guy, he's done this before. I think that's important. And I think it's also important to remember our depth is really in local knowledge, really understanding how to adapt locally.
One minute comment on the numbers.
Let me focus on focus because I think it's a regional problem. So just as a story, 2 years into Kareem, one of my very good friends, and he's not someone, he's very, very well educated, works at a good place. He asked me, so now that you've done Kareem, what's next? Right? And I found that question quite odd. I think we live in a region where a lot of big businesses have been built by doing many different things. There are conglomerates. There's a family business that does automotive, and they do hospitals, and they do education. And that's unfortunately the reality that we see in front of us. But what a lot of people don't recognize is to build these large institutions like the Googles and the Facebooks and the others of the world, it requires years and years and decades of sustained focus. So if you want to build institutions, you need to focus. It's not done in 2 years. It's not done in 4 years. It's not done in 10 years potentially. And as a region, as entrepreneurs and people in the region, we don't focus enough. I meet a lot of smart people in the region, especially in Saudi. They want to do 2 or 3 things and they brag about it. I'm doing like these 3 things.
Projects.
Projects or whatever this thing is. But it's a source of pride. I'm doing these 3 things. And my advice to them always is find that one big thing that you're passionate about and just focus on it. This is something that you should do 200% for the next 10 years of your life. And then, inshallah, we'll see a Google. Inshallah, we'll see a Facebook from the region. And we need it. We need one Google, one Facebook, one Microsoft from the region for this whole movement to start.
Inshallah. Guys, between VCs, because collaboration was a competition. And when I talk to VCs, some say that they often get term sheets of entrepreneurs that have raised from other VCs, and they look at the term sheet and they're scared from the terms, that they'd rather not invest in it, and they pass on that.
Yeah.
So talk a bit about this, about how should entrepreneurs think about that when they're coming to you, and what is the baggage that you would block, basically?
I think a lot of what we see that's problematic in term sheets comes less from VCs and more from angels or high net worth individuals or family institutions, where particularly investing at the early stage, you can see how some investors can be predatory owing to the fact that it's easier to deploy capital rather than to raise capital. So there's less money chasing companies, basically. There's more money chasing like a small number of companies. So what you see is some predatory practices. You see some investors wanting to take 50%, 60%, 70% of the company, want to control the board, want to control, want to basically manage this business or want to integrate it with their other existing business from day one. And a lot of the times, it's just not worth it, right? You can't fix it, right? Once you see a term sheet like that, how do you come back from that?
Examples of terms to watch out
So
for?
like the first is kind of like ownership, right? Like we see 400, about 300 companies last year, of which I would say 50 had existing cap tables where the founders were so diluted at a very early stage that there's so much risk built in the founder just leaving the company, because if things get tough, I mean, what's in it for him? So I think we need to kind of work on educating the market around kind of making sure we have entrepreneurs well incentivized to kind of drive businesses.
I think just to summarize and try and keep it short, what we find is definitely cap table issues is definitely probably the number one problem when we enter investments. I think certain preferred rights, such as liquidation preferences, are deterrent for us, not exciting to invest in. I think it changes also the return profile. Once they set that precedent, the next few rounds, the entrepreneur is going to be the first one screwed, and then every other investor after that is going to get screwed in the process.
Yeah, you can't, I mean, just an important point is you cannot, in this asset class, in venture, you can't structure or engineer your way to a return. You can't create some nifty instrument that has like 3x liquidation preference and warrants and I don't know what and all this stuff. That doesn't make you a return as long as the company works, right? If anything, you're really harming the company and harming the ability of the company to be able to raise at the next round.
But I'd like to add that, I mean, there are different structures that we can see. So there's dividend clauses that are replacing the liquidation preference that entrepreneurs don't really pay attention to, which can really affect the impact of the return. There's anti-dilution clauses that can really deter further rounds of investment, especially if it's at a down round, which we've done before. We've invested at a down round before, and the anti-dilution was good enough for the entrepreneur. But if they weren't, it would have been definitely a problem for us as investors. There's a whole host of other.
So keep the term sheet simple and don't invest in investors. I mean,
veto rights. There's veto rights on entrepreneurs. Sometimes we've seen term sheets where they have veto rights on specific decisions where you're like, shouldn't be having control over that decision. So.
Yeah. So VCs told me that from their view, entrepreneurs negotiate way too much over valuation, and they get stuck on that. They think it's a bad thing. What do you think?
There's an inherent conflict in that question, right? Of course, they must think it's a bad thing.
I think actually it goes back to the point that Amir just said. Khaled just said, when you see a term sheet where it's so early in the day and the founder is like heavily diluted. So I think the reality is it's the opposite.
That's an extreme case that you're describing. They're talking in general. When you negotiate and you sit down on the table, you get stuck over the valuation, not over other stuff that might be more important, or over different things of alignment. So
look at it this way, right? I actually find the VCs negotiating over valuation completely like bogus, right? It doesn't make any logical sense. It's going to be, especially early stage, it's going to be a big thing or it's not going to be anything. Whether you come in at 3 million or 4 million, you're going to lose your money, you're going to make it big. So why are you negotiating over 3 to 4 million? It doesn't make any logical sense for you.
Yeah.
I think the issue is when the delta is bigger than 25% or
Let's say it's 5 million.
yeah, but that's the whole
There are
point.
people here that have lost Kareem because of the 2 million difference.
No, but let me tell you from our experience why valuation is important. Because of the stuff that we're, if you're gonna go to the market and raise a 20 or 30 million dollar check, then people are gonna come and say, look at this cap table, it's not right, fix it, and then come back to us. So we cannot.
But if anything, the higher valuation gives the founder a bigger share of the business, which is good for the
I'm
capital.
not arguing
More room to
against
raise
lower
funds
valuation.
in the future.
hold on,
so-
hold
I'm not arguing against lower valuation. I'm just saying the exercise of valuation should be agreed upon. If you're building a business that has $1 billion real addressable market and not some bogus numbers that you think are real, then yes, valuation makes
when you
sense. But
definitely
if
address
it's
your-
I agree with you. I
Guys,
agree with
sorry.
One thing to say on Mudassir, it's black and white. If you raise the round and you execute,
That's the
that's
right
it.
valuation.
Like he's right. He's right. It's a yes or no. If the seed round is just to test if this is going to be a big business or not. So the difference is really negligible. But I think it also sets alignment issues. It has to be a win-win. It can't just be I want to get diluted by 5% because and do it at a $10 million valuation. But, you know, there's a balance.
No, I
But
think
it's true that you guys build your own case, and your own case that you go build on, work on, has a valuation metric. So you are
Yeah.
price sensitive, while
So we-
Mudassir is saying don't be at the early stage.
Yeah,
What is your comment
think,
on that?
I think, so obviously we have to build our kind of own returns threshold, and that's how we kind of get to a valuation. But really the other major reason, and we see this a lot in companies that's problematic, is that companies may be able to raise at the seed round at a very high valuation. Whatever, high is relative, obviously. It's whatever the market sets, but high compared to the market. And then they raise again at another high valuation. What that creates, the high valuation relative to the market, creates the expectation that the business is growing disproportionately faster than the market. So unless you deliver on that growth, you know, you can find yourself in a situation where the business is doing okay, right? You're doing well, but you're not, you know, tripling, quadrupling every year. You're growing, but your valuation is so high you can't justify raising money anymore, and you have to get into a down round scenario, and that's a very complicated
think
process.
just-
So, like, setting the valuation appropriately is the key to kind of like mitigate that kind of growth thing.
I think it's stage relevant. So
Exactly,
the early stage is not so important.
It's not so important.
But
yeah.
definitely as the company
Well, it
performs
definitely
and
seems
executes.
important to the entrepreneur. I mean, that's what Mudassir
Yeah.
is saying. Important for you as well, because that's what Walid is saying. So this is where a conflict comes in, how to solve that.
If you meet a great company at the early stage and you know it's a great company, honestly, it doesn't matter. But it's rare that you find it, you know? It's rare that you see it. I think if I'd met Mudassir 3 years ago, we'd have done the deal. Wouldn't have even asked what the valuation is. But that's rare, right? Like, there are not that many companies that kind of fill within that.
Okay, cool. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 minutes left. So 30-second answers by each. Why are you in it? What's in it for you?
Couldn't get another job.
So Khaled, his only job is VC. Walid?
Multiple things, obviously, for the money, for the story as well.
Money and the story.
Excellent. So I think I'm in it because I mean, this is a regional problem that needs to be solved for. I think we need to build more success stories, role models. I think the impact of that is so powerful that it can resonate for decades and hundreds of years if we actually do it right today. So I think it's more on changing the lives of people and generations to come.
I think seriously, I mean, for me, it's really about, in a way...
30 seconds, 30 seconds.
No,
Why-
you're
why
having,
don't-
no, my 30 seconds are running away.
Next, go on.
I think the region needs impact, and you know we need to all come together and help the region really grow its economy. And I think this is one way in which we can do this. And
So you're not in
that's
it for
why
the money, basically.
No, but
So you can
they,
put
they
any
should
valuation they
be
want.
they should be fully aligned. The money and the growth.
Okay, you guys. Joy, why are you in it? Why did you come from San Francisco? Except for
Me, I
for
will.
bitching on the Asian business about regulations.
So, yes, I'm famous for that. For me, it's to solve a problem. I'm here to solve a problem of no addresses. I want everybody to open up the Fetcher app, press a button, and have somebody show up at the door without asking for directions. That's my vision, to disrupt the way people and to solve the problem of no addresses. That's why I'm here.
Nice. Lulu.
I love the roller coaster. Every night when I go back home, I have a story to tell, whether it's good or bad. There's always something happening. I think I live on that, and I want to build something big and memorable and success story, hopefully.
Great.
I think at Kareem, we are a bit more in the Amir camp. We would love to build an institution that creates a lot of entrepreneurship and prosperity in the region for decades and centuries to come.
All right, last question and we're done. Last question, what will you change in your moving forward in your daily activity as part of this debate? Hopefully something. Because hopefully we got to air out our dirty laundry now. As what I read on the 7 tips for couple therapy, now it's about conversion. So Amir, you start.
What resonated with me was the idea that Mudassir said, that I think connecting people with sector-specific acumen, so building our network and connecting them to people that understand sectors better than we do, and trying to extract that knowledge and learn.
Nice. Walid?
I think more patience and more communication with the entrepreneurs, whether they are portfolio companies or none. I think that's needed.
Nice.
I think something we're working on continuously, and I think raised today, is that we can be faster making investment decisions, and also faster supporting companies, and more supporting them more impactfully.
Joy?
So I was just asking her the exact question because it was a
What
little...
will you do differently part of this debate, if anything?
What would I do differently?
After, when you go back to your fetcher and you're doing some work.
What would I do differently about this debate?
No, as a result of this debate.
Oh, what would I do different? Oh, what lessons have I learned from this debate?
That you will apply,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry, that's the... basically, the thing that I would take away is probably I'm going to call up every one of my VCs with a list of deliverables that I want. I think that's what I took away from here. So you gave me the deliverables.
Tip from Mudassir, yeah. Lulu.
Absolutely, yeah, me too. I was going to say the same. Have a list for my investors, send it to them with deadlines. I think it's a
I like the
good
I'm going to
idea.
get back to you. Can I have your
Yeah,
card?
yeah, sure, yeah.
I want to let you see how many I get
Offline,
answered.
Mudassir.
Absolutely.
I think one thing that might be helpful is, and again, I agree with these two things as well, reach out to the VCs and do more with them. But maybe publish Kareem's transaction documents for everyone to learn from. And
Which?
That's a great idea.
transaction documents.
Perfect.
If you could
Send them to Omda, we'll put them online. He wanted to ask, but I
No,
we sanitize them. And
Well,
then,
can we take a moment to thank you for putting this together?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Steph, for
thanks,
this.
Khalid.